The radio squawked at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Static, clipped words. The kind of call that tightens your gut. Structure fire. 2347 Maple Ridge Drive. Possible occupants inside. I shoved into my turnout gear and bolted 4-engine 4 with the rest of our volunteer crew. That address sat inside Riverside Estates, my neighborhood, for the last 15 years. We tore through the quiet streets with lights flashing and sirens screaming. By the time we turned onto the community's private lane, the smell of smoke rolled over us like a warning. Ahead, an orange wash stained the sky. This wasn't a small kitchen blaze. This was serious. Then the truck stopped, hard, a heavy metal chain padlocked. 2 posts on either side was stretched across the entrance to Maple Ridge Drive. Parked sideways behind it was a white Lexus, acting like a deliberate roadblock. Leaped from the cab, fury rising. This was the very scenario I'd been begging the board to fix. Captain Rodriguez was already on the radio, voice low but tight as piano wire, reporting the obstruction. The house was barely 300 yards inside the gate. With that barrier, it felt like miles. My name is Marcus Thompson. I volunteered as a firefighter in Riverside Estates for 8 years. We're a small, gated enclave, about 200 homes run by an HOA with an appetite for rules. For most of my time here, the annoyances were tolerable. Then Karen Hartley took over as president 6 months ago, and everything tipped. Karen measured grass with a ruler, fined people for mailboxes in the wrong hue of black, and treated her colonial 3 houses down like a fortress. Within a week, she pushed through 6 absurd regulations. The chain barriers were the worst of them. She sold the board on locked chains at every entrance to reduce undesirable traffic. When I raised the emergency access issue at a meeting, she brushed me off with a smile and a snort. "Oh, Marcus," she'd said, fingernails immaculate. "Emergency crews can always use the main gate. We can't have random cars cutting through our roads." I explained that minutes matter, especially for fires, and that routing to the main entrance could cost lives. She accused me of scaremongering and had me asked to leave for being disruptive. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I'd escalated complaints to the fire marshal, certified letters to the board, even a consult with an attorney. Karen had the money and the spite to fight back. She started bombarding me with petty violations. Everything from a tiny oil spot on my driveway to leaving my trash cans curbside too long. The whole neighborhood had been bone dry. An early drought and gusting winds had turned the area into a tinderbox. I'd sent another formal warning to the HOA only a week earlier with charts and response time data attached. At the following meeting, Karen had my letter read aloud in a mocking tone, called me paranoid, and suggested I needed a hobby other than worrying about disaster. Now, standing with smoke belching into the night, her ridicule tasted like cold ash. Rodriguez materialized beside me with bolt cutters. "We're cutting it," he said. "Every second counts." The Lexus's driver's door slammed open, and out came Karen Hartley in silk pajamas, rage carved across her face. "What do you think you're doing?" she screeched, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the cutters. "That chain is HOA property. You can't just destroy it." "Ma'am, there's a structure fire," Rodriguez said, keeping his voice flat and professional. We need immediate access. Karen planted herself in front of the chain. This is a private road. You have no authorization. There are procedures to follow, she hissed, putting herself between him and the barrier. Behind us, the second engine and a ladder truck pulled in. Radio chatter spiked. The blaze was gaining on the wind. I wanted to shove her aside and cut the lock myself. Instead, I stepped forward and said, "Karen, people could die because of this. Move aside, or you'll be arrested for obstruction." She whirled on me like she'd been waiting. "Of course, you're mixed up in this, Marcus. Still sore about that HOA vote, aren't you? I'm president. I decide who uses our roads. Go around to the main entrance like everyone else." Rodriguez had had enough. He hit the mic. "Dispatch, be advised, we have an individual actively obstructing fire. Suppression efforts at 2347 Maple Ridge. Doctor requesting immediate law enforcement. Assistance unit repeating 2347 something." In Karen's face changed. Her voice, which had been a sneer, went thin. "Did you say 2347? She asked. Rodriguez repeated the address. She started moving toward the chain with hands suddenly clumsy. The color ran from her cheeks. "That's my house," she mumbled, barely loud enough over the roar of the flames. "My daughter, she's home. Miranda's home." Her fingers fumbled in pajama pockets. She dropped her keys twice, trembling. "Please, please, I'll unlock it. Save her. You have to save her. She's only 14. The change in Karen was instantaneous, like watching ice melt under a blowtorch. The imperious HOA president, who had once lorded over our neighborhood, vanished, replaced by a terrified mother clawing at a padlock with trembling hands. Her perfect hair fell into her tear-streaked face as she yanked at the chain, desperate to rip it open before the key even turned. "Move," Captain Rodriguez barked, stepping forward with the bolt cutters. The metal chain snapped with a sharp, echoing clang, and our engine surged through the opening. Karen was left standing there in the road, her silk pajamas flapping in the night wind as we roared past. The sight that met us was pure hell. The entire second floor of Karen's grand colonial home was swallowed in fire. Flames tearing from every window, the structure howling under its own destruction. Smoke billowed thick and black from the open front door. On the lawn, a woman in a robe screamed directions. "One of the neighbors. Her room's in the back. Second floor, last window on the right," she cried, pointing frantically. "She was there a few minutes ago, but she's gone." Rodriguez began issuing orders before she'd even finished. Our crew moved on instinct, years of training kicking in. I grabbed my air pack and followed Mitchell and Davis straight for the entrance. The heat hit us like a physical blow. Even through our gear, it was brutal. Inside, visibility dropped to nothing. The world became swirling, black smoke and orange glow. "Stay low and stay tight," I shouted, dropping to my knees. We crawled forward, feeling the wall, listening to the structure groan under stress. Over the roar of fire, I heard the ladder truck positioning outside, hoses charging with pressure. We were running against time. The second floor could collapse any minute. Behind us came the sound of chaos. Karen trying to break past the firefighters holding her back. "Miranda," she screamed, voice cracking with panic. "Please, my baby's in there." I forced myself to tune her out. If I hesitated, If I let emotions slip in, someone would die. Room by room, we cleared the first floor, then found the stairs. The heat intensified as we climbed. Every step sounded like it might give way. At the top, the hallway stretched both ways, a tunnel of smoke and fire. "Split up," I ordered. "Mitchell, take left. Davis, with me." We moved, right, guided by the neighbor's directions. The first door led to an office engulfed in flames. The second was a bathroom, clear. The third door was closed, heat pulsing through the knob. This was it. I tried the handle. It was locked. No time for subtlety. I stepped back and kicked with everything I had. The door splintered open, revealing a teenager's bedroom turned inferno. The canopy bed blazed, posters curled into ashes on the walls, and there, in the far corner, a small figure crouched, unmoving. "I've got her," I shouted, charging forward. Miranda Hartley was unconscious, but still breathing, overcome by smoke. I lifted her into my arms, her body frighteningly light, and turned just as the ceiling above us collapsed. Flaming debris rained down, forcing us to duck. Davis cleared a path with his axe, cutting through falling timbers as we made our escape. The staircase was buckling beneath us, each step a gamble. We hit the entryway just as the upper hallway flashed over, the fire consuming everything in a rolling wave of heat. 30 seconds later, we'd all have been dead. I burst onto the lawn, cradling Miranda's limp form. Paramedics rushed forward, taking her from me, starting oxygen and IVs, as I ripped off my mask and gasped for air. Around us, the battle continued. Hoses snaking, water arcing into the flames, the house groaning under collapse. Karen was there in an instant. She dropped to her knees beside the stretcher, sobbing, calling her daughter's name over and over. When Miranda's eyes flickered open and she whispered, "Mom," Karen crumpled, clutching her hand like it was her last tie to life. It took nearly 4 hours to extinguish the fire. By dawn, nothing remained of the Hartley home but a skeleton of charred beams dripping with water. Investigators later determined it had started from a faulty wire in the attic, smoldering for hours before erupting. With a proper response time, we could have contained it to one room. But those 6 lost minutes at the gate had doomed the house. Karen sat on a neighbor's porch, wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, staring blankly as the investigators worked. She looked hollow, like the fire had burned more than wood and drywall. When she saw me approach, she didn't sneer, didn't speak in that sharp, commanding tone I'd come to despise. Her voice was quiet, raw. "Marcus," she said, barely above a whisper, "I need to apologize. Not just for tonight, for everything. You tried to warn me, and I ignored you. I let my pride, my need for control, almost kill my daughter." I sank onto the porch beside her, too exhausted to feel any satisfaction. "Miranda's alive," I said simply. "That's what matters." She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the blackened remains of her home. "The chain," she murmured. "The chief told me it delayed you by 6 minutes. 6 minutes, Marcus. That's all it took for the fire to spread from the attic to the entire 2nd floor. 6 minutes. That nearly destroyed my life." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a deep breath and said something I never expected. "I'm resigning as HOA president, effective immediately. And I'll make sure every access restriction, is removed before someone else pays for my arrogance. 2 weeks later, the HOA gathered for an emergency meeting. The room was packed. Karen stood before everyone, looking smaller, older. Her resignation letter was short. No excuses, no blame shifting. She personally endorsed a motion to remove all the road barriers and adopt the fire department's full emergency access plan. The vote passed unanimously. When the meeting ended, I walked up to her with a small box in hand. Inside was a 6-inch piece of the chain we'd cut that night, still scorched black by falling embers. "For your new house," I said quietly. A reminder that some barriers aren't worth keeping. She took it with trembling fingers, tears sliding down her face. The HOA fines against her for visible fire damage totaled over $12,000. Her insurance company, citing negligent obstruction of emergency services, denied her claim, leaving her with a $400,000 mortgage on ashes. The state fire marshal's office filed charges for reckless endangerment. She eventually took a plea deal, 3 years probation, and 5,000 hours of community service with the fire department. When the judge read the sentence, Karen didn't protest. Her expression said everything. A woman who had finally understood the true cost of control.